It's a big week and it's a nervous week for myself because obviously what's going on affects me in a big way. If you're listening on the podcast, I can confirm that currently I'm wearing a Philadelphia Eagles hoodie. I've got a Philadelphia Eagles football in the background as well. So you know, I've got my biases fairly clearly laid out. But obviously, look, I'm nervous as well. It's Super Bowl 57 coming up this weekend live on Sky Sports. Also free, by the way, if you're a Sky subscriber on Sky Showcase, or also it's on ITV for the first time since 2007. If that's how you want to watch the Super Bowl, if you're a psychopath, that's an option that's open to you. You can have, I don't know, the ITV coverage just wasn't for me. And I know I'm a bit of a homer, but still. Here to discuss it is returning after last week, joining us to discuss the Six Nations, the one and only Irish Examiner's David Kent. Kento, Six Nations kicked off obviously this weekend. We expected a tough tie against Wales. We expected France to absolutely blitz Italy. It kind of worked out the exact opposite way, which seems really good. Am I right?
Yes and no. I mean, Ireland did all the hard work in the first half and then forgot how to play rugby for three quarters of the second half, which was a bit alarming. They obviously do a lot of work, but if Wales had kind of had their hand in theirs and I would if maybe even 3 or 4 more weeks with Gatlin as coach, I would have been very uncomfortable there. But listen, got the bonus point, got the job done, and then watched this Italy. Now, like I did say that they could have beaten them in the preview. I didn't say I expected it. And you're just thinking, Janie Mac, if Tommy Allen's penalty goes when they're 6 points down or when they're 5 points down, goes about 2 inches left and sneaks inside the post, and they get that late penalty inside the 22, you're like, that one, like one of the biggest upsets in
Mm.
Six Nations. But it didn't happen. And France, now it's the exact opposite, as you say, what we were talking about last week. We were like, oh, Wales give us a test, and Italy won't give France a test. Italy gave them the biggest test they've had in a long time, and we
Yeah.
kind of steamrolled our way through, and then sleepwalked our way through the Welsh game. So it ramps up for this weekend now. It makes it even more unpredictable for me.
Yeah.
But also Scotland beat England, and that's just brilliant anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and there you go. We got to enjoy it in the middle as well. Though I think the weekend conditions us quite nicely because it started off with Everton beating Arsenal, so we were conditioned for sensational upsets, and that's what made for me that made the Italy game a bit. I'm like, no, look, this could happen. Like, so we've seen weirder like yesterday alone. So really exciting start, and yeah, look, teed up for an absolute barn burner. But we're not here to discuss the Six Nations. I did want to touch on you on something because again, if people listening to the podcast, they would have just heard our review of Knock at the Cabin, Dave Bautista's new movie, M. Night Shyamalan. People have heard my thoughts already, so I'm not going to kind of go into them again. But you were saying, oh, fair, you've kind of seen it this weekend. What were your own thoughts, just to get a reference point?
yeah, no, everyone who knows me knows I'm a real movie buff. So like I've seen what I'd seen in the build up to it was that Batista and Dave Batista in interviews was saying that he really wanted to show kind of his emotional acting range because he's, correct me if I'm wrong, he's never really been anything bar a tough guy, a tough funny guy, or just a funny guy in a film.
Mm.
He was absolutely spectacular, and he will deservedly get credits. But I think Jonathan Groff also deserves plaudits for his like we've seen him on stage obviously before in a number of productions, the original King George and Hamilton for God's sake, but he was absolutely superb in it as well. It was like the and like Shannon as well, just the framing, like the focus at times, and then like just background, like you just pick up little things and like it just the score. Sorry as well, the score like eerie, but like beautifully put together. I'm really like I'm not a horror fan. I don't like horror films at all. And I saw the trailer for this one, and I turned to my good lady and said, "I want to see this one." And she was like, "What? You hate horrors?" And I was like, "This just looks psychological thriller. Like, give me that all day." I could not like I couldn't. It's weird. It's weird as a wrestling fan watching Batista like from the day just being this real gentle well thought out character. Just like what like a tremendous acting all around.
Okay, good stuff. Well, look, you and me have kind of conflicting opinions. You know, Batista obviously we can agree on. I called him Pavarotti performing on a Tuesday night in an old man empty pub. Um,
Nice.
I wasn't big on the movie, but again, all opinions, and it takes all sorts, and that's why we like to get a breadth of opinions and have a discussion. But we're not here to discuss movies. We're not here to discuss Six Nations. Let's get to it. We're here to discuss Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs, 1 seed in the NFC, 1 seed in the AFC. This Sunday, 11:30 p.m. in the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. We're kind of, again, we're not going to get into heavy analysis because we're a week out. There's a lot still to kind of go in. We don't have full up-to-date team news. Obviously, there could be narratives and stuff that kind of break over Super Bowl week. That's a whole event in itself. So we're just going to give a general preview and kind of set you up and put you in the mood. And then if you want to kind of get more in depth, you can as kind of the week goes on. In particular, I recommend the likes of Bill Barnwell on ESPN around the NFL podcast as well. They're kind of the go-tos that I've had, that I'd have as well. Let's start at kind of the line. It's opening up with the Eagles at -1.5. The total over under for points is 50.5, which for me is an absolute steal. I think this is going to be a high scoring game, but the Eagles coming in favorites. Is that something that the identical records? But is that something that kind of surprised you, or does that sound about right to you?
I think it just sounds about right, but like I would have been very surprised if it was anything more than 1.5 in the market, because that, like, obviously, like, they have to put it one way or the other. That's a coin toss. I could look at that tomorrow, I'd say, and it could be the Chiefs -1.5, and I wouldn't be surprised. Like, you mentioned it, it's the number one seed against the number one seed. It is the two best teams in the Super Bowl, and that's kind of what we want every time. If our own teams can't make it, like some unfortunate souls. But you're looking at it going, and there will be so many stories. I agree with you with the points total as well. I can see this being one where you're thinking about it in 10 years' time and going, wow, like we had this with the two best teams in the league, probably the two best quarterbacks, like some of the best like receiving cores and defense. Hassan Reddick for the Eagles, and then you just got like it's mouth watering. I cannot wait to, like, I'm already counting down to where it's like, and I can't imagine why you're like you're an Eagles fan, as you mentioned, like your nerves are probably all over the road, but as a neutral coming into it, it's like I'm just get me to Sunday night, get me to me popcorn, me pizza, me drinks, bring it on.
We're due a classic Super Bowl, and everything points to that here. Again, the bookies are always going to try slant one way or another, and the market will also kind of have a say in that as well. I see where they're going for, because the Eagles have blown out two teams, but obviously then you're having the Giants, who are just a bit overmatched. If the Eagles were coming in at full strength, which we have throughout the playoffs, and the 49ers were banged up again, we did blow them out, but that wasn't a true measure of kind of the 49ers. Whereas the Chiefs have struggled, and they kind of, crawled and limped over the line, literally in the case of Patrick Mahomes, with his last gasp play, like literally being the only kind of significant running play he had because he has had his own high ankle sprain issues recently that's kind of hampered him. Hopefully shouldn't this weekend, because I think we do want to see everyone in kind of flying form. But these two teams have so many similarities. I think for me, this is set up to be an absolute classic Super Bowl, the best Super Bowl since the last time the Eagles were in the Super Bowl against the Pats, I'd say, and we're due an absolute classic as well. But when you look at everything, there's so many similarities, and not to mention as well, and we won't kind of go too in depth on this, both teams have a Kelce. the Kelce brothers. You have the Eagles starting center, Jason Kelce, and you have the Chiefs star tight end, Travis Kelce, playing. They won't be on the field at the same time, but they are on each side. And that's how similar they are. But the coaches as well are two coaches who spent time in the opposite dugout. Andy Reid is one of the heroes of Philadelphia, hired in 1999, coached us for 14 years, had one Super Bowl appearance, obviously lost against the Patriots. We avenged that loss, obviously, after he left. It took us to 5 NFC championship games, won more games than any coach in franchise history. But again, then you have kind of the Eagles. They're in the second Super Bowl since he left, and kind of have almost been more successful without having the tenure. Nick Sirianni has taken him to him in his second year. He spent 4 years at the Chiefs. So very interesting article up on theathletic.com if you subscribe to that, and I recommend you do. Some great coverage there. Originally hired under his friend Todd Haley. It was his first NFL job for the Chiefs. As a quality control coach, he was promoted to assistant QB coach and then wide receiver coach after Haley left. He worked there under offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, who is obviously the New York Giants coach now that he saw off in the playoffs, and also met his wife there. Again, but the kind of contrast doesn't end there. Both of them were fired in 2012. Reid went to the Chiefs, Sirianni went to the Chargers before he went to the Colts, and then like since then, Reid has one Super Bowl win and 5 AFC championships with the Chiefs. Sirianni has made the playoff in both years with one Super Bowl. So there's kind of they've never worked directly together, but there's parallels there that are undeniable. It's not so much a teacher versus student case. If Doug Peterson was the coach still, that would be more similar. And we had that earlier in the playoffs when the Chiefs faced the Jags. But there is kind of, the greatest coach in the Eagles history versus someone who may be playing for that one day and can already in his second season there outdo what Andy Reid did in terms of achievements. Where do you think the advantage lies in terms of the coaching battle? Because obviously their history on you plays so much, but you have the experience kind of head in Andy Reid, but then in Nick Sirianni, you have the new, hungry. If you've listened to him in interviews, he's not afraid to say it. I remember when the Eagles beat the Indianapolis Colts, who Sirianni used to work for at the Colts. We beat them in the last minute with one of the last plays of the game. Very close, tense game. And then Sirianni went around just yelling, "That was for Frank Reich, who the Colts had sacked previously." He doesn't mind like saying it what he means. Very well suited to the city of Philadelphia. Who do you think has the advantage here though when it comes to the X's and O's?
It's a really interesting point. You're thinking that it's almost like it's not a young pretender to Andy Reid, obviously, but you think it's like second season for an achievement for Sirianni to even get into the Super Bowl. Like obviously, look, we're talking about the squad that they have and the stars that they have on all three teams, really, if you include Jake Elliott. But like you still have to coach that group. You still have to manage that, and he's done that magnificently. Andy Reid, famous for not winning a Super Bowl with Philadelphia, having had incredible star power as well. But like you mentioned, took them to heights that they hadn't seen in a long time. And then suddenly he's up against this fella who's like, "Oh, look at what I can do." And I'm not going to say that he will say it because I think he might have a bit more respect for him. But like if you talk to me on Monday and Nick Sirianni in a post-match press winning press conference, that's just sitting there with the Super Bowl and going, "Look, Andy, look what I have." I can easily see him doing it.
Yeah, he's the type.
And don't get me wrong, all for that. All for coaches that are like that. And Andy Reid isn't like, don't get me wrong, Andy Reid's not exactly partial to cutting things loose at times as well, just in his own way. He's more calm about it, but he's kind of like Alex Ferguson. That's it. To give you a dig, in the ribs while looking straight at your face and going, yeah. But like, it's as you say, it's just such a good matchup in terms of playbooks, in terms of panels and squads. And if there was an over-under also, I'm just going to sneak this in because you were talking about the Kelces. If there was an over-under market on how many times their mom is shown on the camera, I'd be looking at maybe about 45. Because every time, so like if Travis Kelce does a 20-yard run after catch, they're going to cut to her. If I don't know what this is like, if Jason Kelce snaps the ball badly or something, it's just going to cut to her. But it's magnificent. I'll always go for experience in Super Bowls. Now that obviously you can point to X, Y, and Z for how that doesn't work. Belichick against any Super Bowl that the Patriots lost in the last 15 years is the antithesis of that. But if you've been there and you've won and you've lost, then you think you're able to instill that in players, and particularly in like rookies or younger players who haven't been there before. Whereas Andy Reid has been there, done that, got the trophy, got the runner-up T-shirts, got everything. Sirianni, it'll be interesting to see how he deals with it. Like he could easily come out and just nail it, and be able, or he might get caught up too much into it. It doesn't seem like he is already, but you never know on game day itself if the ref makes a bad call, if something doesn't quite go to plan. What his reaction will be is fantastic. Whereas be more confident than Andy Reid, going, "Oh look, 4th and 2 didn't work out. Fine, let's move on." But that's just what comes with experience. So, listen, as a second-year head coach, I haven't been coaching for a long time as well. But Reid, like I said, Andy Reid been there, so I'd lean towards experience in that sense. But again, I like it's just such a It's like I said, it's just such a coin flip. You could talk me into that in the air.
It's a very similar battle then at quarterback, where you have Patrick Mahomes against Jalen Hurts. And Patrick Mahomes, you have the MVP in waiting. But in Jalen Hurts, you have someone who, at least up until December, when he obviously got hurt for the last few games and then came back when he wasn't quite 100%. The MVP is obviously judged on regular season performance. That's when the votes are tallied and so on. He would have felt that he would have been a strong contender for that. In terms of numbers, look, Mahomes does have him beat when you judge it based on numbers solely. Mahomes finished 14-3 despite losing Tyreek Hill, his star wide receiver, and having to make do with the likes of Juju Smith-Schuster, who didn't kind of replicate what Hill used to bring to the team. He led the league in passing yards. There was nobody within 500 yards of him. He led the league in passing TDs. There was no one within 5 touchdowns of him. And he led the league in total QBR, which is quarterback rating, and it's just kind of how a way of measuring kind of efficiency as a quarterback and making the right choices, and kind of measures against like the strength of the defenses that they play as well. No one was in 6 points of them. So again, when you look at it purely statistical, Mahomes is there. He's won a Super Bowl before. Again, if you're talking experience, this is Hurts' first Super Bowl. If you were looking at Hurts last year, one thing that people kind of said, and there was kind of a question around Hurts. It isn't there anymore, but there was a question around Hurts coming into this season because of how outmatched and how out of place he looked in last year's playoffs, as we lost to Tom Brady's Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this is his first Super Bowl. This is obviously another step up, although he has performed admirably in the playoffs so far and kind of, cast that demon to bed. He can win the playoffs. He's taking his team to the Super Bowl now. But again, this is a whole other level of attention. This is a whole other level of expectation and pressure. Mahomes has done it before. We've seen him win it. Who do you think has the advantage at QB?
For me, I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at Jalen Hurts in particular, and it just seems so driven. He seems to like first again. You mentioned he's not been in the league, like he's been in the league a wet week in like long term in a bigger
4 years,
picture
yeah.
kind of thing. So the fact that he's already like just seems so he's got a team to the Super Bowl for one. He's looked good in every like obviously up until week 16, wasn't it, when he came out? I think it was.
Mm.
Like that's so what 14-3 both teams. So let's see, the Eagles, 2 of the losses came with Minshew as quarterback.
Yeah.
And the other was that weird one against it was when you were
Commanders.
8-0, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
the Commanders.
Yeah.
They just caught us, and
Like
yeah, we just
exactly
had
a
enough time.
weird game of football. It wasn't
Yeah.
like Hurts like threw 5 interceptions in those games. It was like the 2 he was missing, the team somewhat collapsed without him. But
Mm.
even still came within it was 7 points to the Cowboys and the Saints, wasn't it, in 17?
Yeah.
So like this like when he drops out there is a big loss. But like I can just say, and you see with his demeanor, with his interviews, with you can see him in these videos from practice and from team meetings as well, where you see people talking about him. He just seems so mature and such a wise enough head. It's kind of like Burrow last year for the Bengals, where it's like anyone else you think might be overawed by the situation, whereas he obviously like put that, as you mentioned, put to bed the ones from last year. Has obviously taken the lessons from that and is now just head down, laser focused on the target. And that's just what Patrick Mahomes is like every day now. And it's just like, okay, Patrick Mahomes is in another Super Bowl, great. But this is what he does. He got blown out by the Bucks, came back, has a ring on his finger already from blowing up the Niners, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yep.
In terms of actually on the field, I actually give the advantage to Hurts. And it's pure, like you mentioned, the passing stats for Mahomes and TDs, the yards, the QB rating. He is not as mobile as Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts second in rushing yards for the Eagles, I think behind Miles Sanders for the season, but he still got something like 750 yards in the regular season. And he's comfortable coming out in the pocket and scrambling and getting and seeing a tackler, standing up a tackler. Mahomes can do that when he has to, but I don't think I don't think if he can make a read and suddenly there's 2 or 3 lads coming down on top of him, he'll slide. Whereas Hurts might look for that extra couple of yards. He'll put himself at risk. Now that might be a bit naive in his short term, but longer term, like that's sorry, it might be not even a longer term. He'll probably get hurt doing it, but he's always looking to go forward. Whereas Mahomes, especially now with the ankle question as well, Mahomes not 100% the last couple of weeks. We're still getting questions about him. How is that ankle? If you can get him out of the pocket, if the Eagles defense can get him out of the pocket on Sunday, it'll be very interesting to see what he does. Does he try and get it out to Kelce, or does he try and scramble? Does he get rid of the ball? Whereas if you get Jalen Hurts out of the pocket, he's almost a little bit more comfortable. He's like, okay, you know what, fine, we'll make this play happen one way or the other. Which is remarkable again for a young quarterback. I don't see that. I don't see any deviation from that in the Super Bowl. I don't see any special tricks from Sirianni. Um, but like he could prove him wrong. And also, you're looking at you're talking about the Chiefs relying on like Kelce and Juju not doing too well, but there's always someone there. Pacheco is a magnificent running back, especially for my dynasty low ball fantasy team. Um, but then you've got like AJ Brown, Devontae Smith for the Eagles. Just the kind of the twin towers, kind of just wrecking teams no matter what. You throw a ball up, Hurts confident enough to throw a ball up and lets either of them go and get it. Like it's a case that he can make any pass or make any throw, and he knows that his receivers will have a chance. So like it's I'd lean towards Hurts for Sunday, which is mad because it's against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But in terms of this, like I'd be leaning towards that one, like just slightly, just because of his capability outside the pocket when running.
For me, I think I don't like the way MVP is judged. I think it's a redundant. I hate it. It's always a quarterback these days. There's no scope for it, despite there being clearly examples of teams where, if you lose key defenders or if you lose key running backs or skill players, then it affects it way more than if you lost your starting quarterback. The likes, if you think of the Titans, you think of the Chargers with the likes of Aaron Donald with the Rams and so on as well. There are like I don't like the way MVP is judged, and it's judged purely on stats, and it's judged on who is the best stats of quarterback. And if like Hurts lost this because he got injured, which isn't his fault, and it shouldn't be counted against him. And we can judge it up to yards per game or touchdowns per game. Now, Mahomes still would have him beat in terms of sheer numbers. But what I like to look at as well is the difference, the most valuable player. When you look at the wording of that, it's based around whose team would be more lost without them. And we saw actually what the Eagles were like without Hurts. It just wasn't the same under Minshew. And Minshew is one of the better backup quarterbacks. And the Eagles as well, when we last won the Super Bowl, we won it with a backup quarterback. We have a good, well-rounded squad, but Hurts is just that difference maker for us. And Mahomes is for the Chiefs as well. Don't get me wrong. They're two very similar quarterbacks. But when you look at kind of the impact that they had on the team, one thing I like to look at is against the spread records. So, for example, this season, the Chiefs, they're not a great team if you're betting on them to cover. First off, part of that is, again, they're victim of their own success. They get quite high handicap lines, so because they're expected to do well and score loads and blow out teams because of having the Mahomes factor. But they play a lot of close games. So they are 7-10 against the spread in the regular season, which is a pretty shocking record. The Eagles were 8-9, only one game better, but that includes the 3 games where Hurts was injured, including the Bears game, obviously, where he went down first, but also the Giants game when he came back where he wasn't 100% and he kind of backdoor covered. So really that's closer to 11 or 12-9 probably, 11 or 12 rather than 8 if Hurts was if Hurts was healthy. It probably ends up at that. The Eagles blow teams out with Hurts, and he drives them forward. Literally, he does. Like 4th and 1, Hurts just every single time will convert it with a QB sneak. It's become a superpower. And so for me, I feel that Hurts has the advantage. He can run, he can throw, he can do everything that Mahomes can do. Mahomes will get more trick plays, and he's quite good at doing kind of unexpected things and improvising. And I think that's Mahomes' superpower. But also Hurts just has options to damage you so severely in so many ways. So again, I'm obviously going to be biased towards the Eagles, but I just got to point that out. So let's kind of get to it because we're already kind of getting to that anyway. Let's talk about predictions. Again, you're looking at the 2 teams' strength of schedule. You're looking at the Chiefs. They probably had a tougher road to the Super Bowl in terms of the playoffs. They got through the Jags and the Bengals, whereas the Eagles defeated the Giants and the banged up 49ers. But again, you can only play what's in front of you. But the Chiefs are probably more battle hardened going into that, since that seems to be between the Six Nations and now this week a metric that we're using. What do you see? Kind of how are you feeling? I know we're a week out and a lot can change within that week, and as we kind of dig deeper into kind of the research and whatnot. But how are you feeling? We're recording this on the Monday, by the way, for anyone wondering. So where's it kind of sitting with you?
I think one of the most important kind of metrics and moments that we will see probably multiple times throughout it is when the Chiefs are driving and they're on maybe third and five, because that's usually when they press the Kelce button. And it's like, right, we need short yardage here, just give it to Travis Kelce, put him on an out route, put him on a curl, put him on a slant, whatever you want to do, just make sure he gets the ball. If the Eagles can either shut down Kelce on that or get to Mahomes, which, like I said it earlier, Hassan Reddick, 21 sacks for the season, including the postseason now. Monster. Absolutely monster stat. Or like, and there's another few people on the Eagles D line that could easily get to him as well. But if they can just like stop them on third and short, and try and force them to either go for it on fourth, depending on where they are, or get the ball back into Jalen Hurts' hands. That'll be almost a game. That'll be almost where this game is won and lost, because you've seen Kansas City so often turn drives where they're looking down, where they're looking like they're going 3-and-out, and suddenly they just manage to get the first one, and that suddenly starts at Mahomes makes it 20, and like that sets them up even like on the halfway line. So say they've gone from a punt or a kickoff and it's just gone out the back of the end zone, third and 5 on their own 30 or whatever it is, and suddenly you're thinking, oh god, they're gonna have to give it straight back 3-and-out, and they just make a play with Kelce more often than not, because that's just reliability. That's who Mahomes feels most comfortable with. And why wouldn't you? It's Travis Kelce. He's just a gigantic human being. So if the Eagles just shut him down there, and if they can get Mahomes out of the pocket and get him running on that ankle, and let's see how good it is, then they will win this game. I still think, like, I agree with you in the sense that 50 for the points, man. I can see this being won by a field goal. I can see it being won in overtime. I could easily see this being maybe 42-39 with a game winner from Jake Elliott in overtime. I just think that the Eagles have a little bit of an advantage, and I am putting it all on Hurts, and I'm putting it all on the strength of the defense, and how we've had questions about Mahomes leading into it. Questions about the ankle. Is he good? Is he going to be able to scramble as much as he can, or as much as he used to? Is he going to be able to make these trick plays? What's going to be up his sleeve? Like, we haven't seen Juju do that much this year. He's still got we haven't really talked about Chiefs running game again. Pacheco, unbelievable for a season. Jet McKinnon still somehow an elite level running back. Like, should not be, for me, as good and is in the Super Bowl for what he brings to a team. But fair play to him for working at it, and fair play to the Chiefs for trusting them with it, because he's still able to just make that 15-20 yard game when you need him to. But there's just something about the Eagles that are making me look at it and going, they're definitely the favorite for me. And it's weird to say, there's just something about the way they've been playing, the way they've been, as you mentioned, they've been blowing out teams. Yeah, look, not testing the playoffs. Not every team gets a test in the playoffs before the Super Bowl. I've no worries about them in that sense, because they've been tested throughout the year as well. So, and like, as you mentioned, if it wasn't for one Cincinnati Bengals shoving Patrick Mahomes out of bounds, might have been the Bengals we're talking about this week. So I see it being a belter. I'm really, really hoping it's a belter. It's like, as you mentioned, we're due a real classic. And we're still due every Super Bowl that is better than the Patriots Rams one a few years ago. That's still up there, ingrained into the back of my mind as the worst Super Bowl of all time. I need a classic to kind of just help push that out of my head. I'm really hoping for this Sunday. I have the Eagles by a field goal. Maybe in overtime, it's just going to be tight, but I reckon I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles then just went nuts as well. But in my head, it's Eagles by a field goal.
Okay. I'm obviously biased. I sit here, like I said, with my Eagles hoodie on, or my Eagles NFL ball in the background. I am biased, but I also feel very confident about this. Not only am I going to give you a prediction, I'm going to give you a bet builder. I'm going to give you a bet to put on a week out ahead of the game. Kendo, you're familiar with how I pick Super Bowls this year, and anyone who's kind of, listened to old shows of mine or followed me on socials and stuff like that will probably be sick of me here and say this, but I think I've got a tried and true tested method. I think last year's Super Bowl was the first time in about 8 or 9 years I didn't make money on a Super Bowl, and it just went the opposite way. But this method, more often than not, is how it's done. It's not about the X's and O's in the Super Bowl. It's about the Super Bowl is the sports movie, and it's about the narrative. Who is the more compelling narrative? So it's about figuring out like what is the storyline, and that's it. And then you kind of go backwards from there and work out, well, if that team has the best narrative, and it just works this way for whatever reason. We've seen it time after time after time where you have the best team and you have the team with the best narrative. It's like the Denver Broncos with Peyton Manning in his last ever game, hanging on by a thread to his career. He is not playing well. The team's not playing well against the Carolina Panthers, who are absolutely dominating in the season, and the Broncos still win just because that's the storyline. Nick Foles playing against the best replacement level quarterback the last time the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, playing against the greatest ever to do it in Tom Brady. There's no reasons for the Eagles to win that game. They won that game. So then you ask how that happens. And what's the storyline we're hearing here? Okay, so you have the experience in Andy Reid, you have the experience in Patrick Mahomes, you have the MVP in waiting, you have the people that are just presumed constantly. Like Hurts didn't get a look in with a lot of the experts when it came to the MVP race, despite the fact that when it came to it, the Eagles were the best team in the NFL this season, and he was the reason why. That is what an MVP is. So if I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts should have won the MVP. I'm actually kind of happier that he didn't, because on Saturday, Mahomes is going to get it, and Jalen Hurts is going to have a fire lit up his arse. Nick Sirianni is going to go in there with everyone kind of questioning him and doubting him, which has been the case all season. When you look at kind of how the two teams got here, though, the Eagles finished 14-3 with an identical record as Kansas City, but they actually had the toughest strength of schedule in the league when you take the schedule or the records of the teams that they beat. The opposing win record of the teams that they beat in the league was 57%, whereas the Chiefs, it was just 51%. They beat the Lions, the Vikings, the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Packers, the Titans, and the Cardinals when they still had Kyler Murray playing well. Throughout the season, and only lost one game when Hurts was healthy. So you have a coach and a star player who were the best team in the league whenever anyone was healthy, who are getting totally overlooked because it's Andy Reid and it's Patrick Mahomes. That is going to light a fire under their arse, and that is also going to create an element of complacency for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So how are they going to do it? It's going to be a high-scoring game, but also as well, what you have to see and what you have to take into account is how the teams got there. The Eagles are capable of shutting great offenses down. I'm not going to say the 49ers were a great offense. They have a lot of great skill players, but didn't have a quarterback to drive it last week, thanks to Brock Purdy getting injured quite early. But also, when you look at the likes of the Minnesota game, when you look at the Cowboys game, when you look at the Jaguars game, when you look at like solid offenses that they played throughout the seasons, the Eagles can shut them down on defense. Kansas City cannot say the same. The Kansas City, you always will score 20 odd points against them at least. I think the 50.5 over under is an easy over for me. I think this is going to be a high scoring game, but I think the Eagles are more capable of shutting down the Chiefs than the Chiefs are capable of shutting down the Eagles. So I'm going to have the Eagles to cover the minus 1.5 line. I think it may still be close, but like I don't think it's going to be that close. I feel confident with that. I think it's going to take the over. The problem is when I do bet builders, I like to go handicap line, over under, and anytime touchdown scorer. The Eagles are very hard to pick an anytime touchdown scorer because we have like even running. If we score a running touchdown, is it going to come from Hurts, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott? Kenneth Gainwell was the running star in the championship game. So we don't know where that's going to come from. Hurts is often your safest bet. But even in terms of catching, you have Dallas Goedert, you have AJ Brown, you have Devontae Smith. You don't know who's going to actually make the catch or who's going to make the big play that sets up the catch in the red zone, you know? So again, it's just a case of like, I never bet the anytime touchdown scorer with the Eagles. I think it's easier for the Chiefs. Travis Kelce anytime. So Eagles minus 1.5, over 50.5, Travis Kelce anytime, and I feel confident with that. So I'm gonna go there. But again, I could be totally biased. I may be on this show this week completely disconsolate and heartbroken. So you never know. We could get blown out as well. Last but not least, I also want to touch on Rihanna. Has her first live performance in over 5 years with the Super Bowl halftime show. Is there anything you're looking forward to here? Is there any cameos you expect? What are you kind of hoping for from Rihanna, or is this not your bag? Like, how are you feeling about this in general?
Oh, look, with the welcome return, like there was so much pressure put onto Rihanna for like fans just to go make new music now. Like she's doing everything else in life. She's having a baby. She's making her own business. She's doing the makeup and the underwear and everything like that. Let her be. And they're like, oh, right, grand. So I think we're done with Rihanna now. So let's everyone move on to the news. And like, bang, back at the Super Bowl. Like the biggest thing on American television. The second biggest sporting event in the world, I think, in terms of viewership, outside of an Olympic year, anyway. But it's just like I'm gonna. It's one of them ones where you're like, even if the game is terrible, and this game isn't gonna be terrible. The halftime show is gonna be good. Again, I'm gonna go back to the Patriots Rams game at Super Bowl a few years ago when they had Maroon 5 as the halftime show, and it was terrible, and that was the worst thing of all time ever on television. So delight Rihanna. Cameos, I'm sure. Like I can name, you can pick anyone out of a hat, and there's going to be cameos, and it's going to be absolutely brilliant. It reminds me a bit like when Coldplay had it in Beyonce and Bruno Mars come out, and it's like class. Just
I think we got Jay-Z definitely nailed on for Umbrella. I'd say Jay-Z could be the first thing we see, just so it's like, oh shit. It's like, oh, they literally started this with Jay-Z. And Umbrella is a great song. Calvin Harris for We Found Love. I think that's going to be there as well. I hope she just goes. And again, the Super Bowl halftime show, they know to just play the hits, play the ones everyone wants to hear. Don't mess around with new material too much. I don't mind if she does one good song or one new song. Again, Rihanna tends to do bangers anyway, but yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be great. Before we finish, real quick, okay, we don't have much time, but I do want to touch on, you're a Green Bay Packers fan. Aaron Rodgers is obviously the big talking point. Do you want to see him stay, or do you want to see him get traded and see what you can get from him and kind of start the rebuild phase? How are you feeling with that? Obviously, because bit of a disastrous season, and I say that as someone who owned Aaron Rodgers in fantasy football. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think at this point, now he's obviously teasing retirement as well, and I wouldn't like with Tom Brady going, you're thinking, Rodgers is the last great stand. And saw someone make a great point. I think it was Pat McAfee, where it's like, if he retires this year, he's going to be in the same ballot for the Hall of Fame as Tom Brady. No one wants that, so he's going to stay around for another year. I think right now, and I change in week on week, I'd rather see Jordan Love as the starting cornerback for next year.
Should you cash out and take the Raiders? Should you see what the Raiders can take, and would you like to see them cash out, or would you like to see Aaron Rodgers kind of, if you, I assume then you'd rather have him traded and get something for him than have him retired?
Get something for him. Because we tried to get him the wide receivers last year. And like, listen, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, fantastic. Amari Rodgers, less than the better. But I just think that with the performance level dropping, now, like it obviously was going to drop from 2 back-to-back MVP seasons. Like no one's kidding themselves there, but just the fall off was spectacular in the size, and it's very hard to bring yourself back up. I know it's Aaron Rodgers, but it's very hard to get back up all that way, even with the help. So I'd rather like from what we hear, Jordan Love, and from what people have seen of him so far, he is fairly solid. He's been mentoring under Aaron Rodgers, as Aaron Rodgers mentored under Brett Favre. So it's not like even if he's terrible, he's going to be a bit brought up level above from being mentored by Aaron Rodgers. So I think we are going to have to give him a shot eventually. So
see what you can get.
I think while you still have Aaron Rodgers around, you can get something for him.
Yeah.
Try and get something for him.
Fingers crossed. Anyway, David Kent of the Irish Examiner. Always a pleasure. Follow him on socials at KentoCCFC. Check him out on the Irish Examiner and buy a physical paper, guys. Show your support. It all helps. And the Irish Examiner, David and the guys over there are doing amazing work in terms of Irish journalism.